Hey, Freq Radio listeners, it's summertime, and up here in the Northern Hemisphere, things are pretty hot. Why not soothe your weary minds by dipping into the Patreon community, where all the cool Freakers hang out? You get early access to new episodes, bonus tomfoolery from me, Carolyn, and Anita, merch discounts, listener polls, and the occasional surprise treat. You'll also get the chance to pat yourself on the back for supporting feminist pop culture analysis. If you want to be part of transforming the entertainment landscape, then support like yours is crucial to making sure that progressive voices are heard and challenging criticism finds a platform. Head on over to patreon.com/femfreak and sign up at any level to show your commitment to being critical of the media you love. But I was like, yes, and it fed my profound narcissism, be like, yes, I am a god to these people, like these characters, they are my creations. It was kind of cool to think about it in that way.
Welcome to Feminist Frequency Radio. This is a show that asks you to be critical of the media you love. I'm Anita Sarkeesian, and I'm joined today by the vision to my Scarlet Witch, Ebony Adams. I don't know why Ebony made... Did you just recently... watch
I didn't, but I did just see, for people who are in the know, I did just see a dude who had an amazing Vashon cosplay at MegaCon. So shout out to that dude. Shout out to that brother. Shout out to Black Twitter for making Vashon a thing. So look it up if you don't know what I'm talking about.
All right. I was a little like, where that's left field, but that's okay.
Listen, people who know our vibe know how accurate this is, Anita, with your dramatic Scarlet Witch ass.
Anyways, and I'm Scarlet Witch, and you're
Yes.
We are neither of those people. Like neither.
Let me have this.
You are not Vision even a little bit.
Introduce our guest.
Okay. As you know, Carolyn abandoned us like a fucking monster that she is. Mm-hmm. So we continue our trend of amazing guests who are better than Carolyn in every way. That's not
I was
true.
just going to say better than us. Like, the key is we have 3 people on the podcast. 2 are trash. That's me and Anita. So we always have to have one good person.
It's always going to be someone comparable. All right. We've got an incredible special guest this week, writer and bon vivant, Charlie Jane Anders. Hello, Charlie Jane.
Hi. Oh my God. Thank you so much for having me. I just want to interject and say that I am in no way better than Carolyn. Carolyn is the ideal to which I aspire. I like every night when I go to sleep, like my last thing that I say to my pillow and to my cat, who's usually on the pillow next to me, is like, please let me wake up being a little bit more like Carolyn.
Oh, me too.
Like, we all do.
Every night. Like, that's like my last nighttime kind of like
I would
final
just
thought
like
of the day.
I would like 5% of Carolyn's brilliance. I just want 5% of it. I think she could do without that 5%.
I think she could too.
Split that.
I think she
each have
each of us 5%. That's just a 15% reduction for her.
I could say the same shit about you, Charlie Jane, which we will.
Accurate.
All right. So this week we're talking to Charlie Jane about the delights of subverting space opera's horror. Okay, I can't read this, Ebony. I don't even know what the fuck words you're using
This week we're talking to Charlie Jane about the delights of subverting space opera's hoary old tropes, the power of delivering writing advice in a killer purple lipstick, and most importantly, her brand new book, Never Say You Can't Survive, How to Get Through Hard Times by Making Up Stories. Stay tuned.
Yay!
See, this is why Ebony needs to just read her own writing, because I always fuck it up. It's so good. It's so good, and I always fuck it up.
The best part is knowing that you haven't read over the scripts in advance, Anita. It's watching and trying to guess where you're going to stumble.
Well, and Ebony uses like words from the like 16th century that you're like,
Girl,
what the fuck is that word?
Girl, bye.
I don't even know what hoary old means.
Goodbye.
Does everybody know what that means, or is it just me?
We have a
you're right. You're both writers.
Yeah.
Oh boy, whatever. All right, you know what? I'm just gonna run straight into the intro, and we're not gonna follow any of our rules, and we're just gonna have a little nice chit chat. So let me just Actually, no, Ebony, you fucking read it. You wrote it.
Oh gosh. Okay, Charlie Jane, I apologize. Anita is on one. Okay.
I'm so broken today.
All right. Charlie Jane Anders is a writer, podcast host, event impresario, and one of the founders of IO9, a website devoted to science fiction, fantasy, futurism, science, technology, and related news. She's the author of several books of speculative fiction and inspirational weirdness, including Victories Greater Than Death, The City in the Middle of the Night, and All the Birds in the Sky. Personal favorite. She's here today to hold our hands as we try to wrestle with creativity in times of crisis. The subject of her new book, Never Say You Can't Survive, How to Get Through Hard Times by Making Up Stories. I'm excited about this. Loved the book.
Yay.
Okay. I am a writer. And so when I follow you on Twitter, and when I saw that the book was coming out, I'm like, okay, this is going to be good. And then I was like, Anita, you know Charlie Jane. Like, can you hook me up? Can we have her on the podcast? And she was like, Ebony, that's a great idea. Like, all of your ideas are so good. I'm going to pay you more money. So whatever. Okay, that's background. Whatever. So I got the book and immediately started reading it. And I was like, this is so comforting. This reminds me that there is so much joy to be found and fun to be found in making up stories. And I needed that when I read it. You know, I think there's so much about, like, you can, you know, find an infinite number of writers justifiably complaining about how hard writing is, but it's hard to, you know, find people who are like, no, this is fun, what we're doing. We need to remember the fun and the joy and the power and like the thrill of doing it. So thank you for writing that kind of book.
Thank you so much for taking the time to read it. And really, that meant so much to me what you just said, because I feel like, you know, there is a lot of writing advice out there that I feel like is very kind of like, I don't know, like tough drill sergeant, like tough love, like suck it up, you know, write every day, get up and, you know, drop and give me 20, you know, all this kind of stuff. Like, are you, you know, I just like all this kind of like tough drill sergeant-y talk that I can't even do because I suck at, I can't
it's not you.
pretend to be a drill sergeant. But I feel like, you know, there's a lot of people who are very macho about writing and very macho about like, I wrote 10,000 words like before breakfast. And like, you know, and some of them were not just the same word 100 times. And like, you know, I don't know. Like, people get very kind of like tough and macho about this. And if you can write 10,000 words before breakfast, that's awesome. And I'm super happy for you. But everybody's different. And like, you know, I think that people get so goal oriented and so kind of like, you know, they put so much pressure on themselves and so many expectations on themselves that they do kind of forget that it can and maybe should be fun. At least parts of the process can be fun. You know, revision is often not as much fun as some of the other parts. And there's always going to be parts that are more challenging. But I think writing can be like, it can be a joy. It can be something that brings you fulfillment. And part of what I'm getting at in the book is that, you know, when things are really messed up and weird and screwy, like a pandemic and like a political meltdown and various other things and climate change, we need to just have like the freedom and the kind of like luxury of like just being like, I'm going to just tell a story. I'm going to tell a yarn. I'm going to just, you know, amuse myself and hopefully other people as well with this like wacky story that I'm making up about stuff that didn't happen or stuff that did happen, but I'm kind of making it my own thing.
I love that. From the book, you know, from like the introduction, I gather that, you know, this started as essays that you had been writing, and I think maybe a couple of talks that you had given, but it just seemed to come together in its current form pretty quickly. Is that accurate? You know, like how long had you been working on this?
Yeah, so I mean, it did start as a talk that I gave, like I think it's starting in 2017, and it was like that was the moment where a bunch of people were like, dang, things are getting really scary. Things are getting really messed up. And, you know, it's hard to like, just, you know, shut yourself off from that and stop doom scrolling. And like a lot of people I knew were really struggling and getting just stuck. And so I gave this talk at some writing conferences about like, look, this is something that you can still do. You can still just like let go and lose yourself in your imagination, and here's some ways you can do that. And, you know, over time, I sort of thought about turning it into a book, but it wasn't really until the start of 2020 that I was like, this is it. I'm going to make this talk that I've been doing into an actual book, and I'm going to expand it, and I'm going to build out that idea and like just kind of break down how to get into your imagination and how to find that part of yourself that we all have. We all are storytellers. Everybody who lives is a storyteller. Like, every day you're like, you get up and you're like telling stories about like the thing that happened to you on the way to work, or, something that you heard about from a coworker or a friend or whatever. We just we're just all telling stories all the time. And so you don't have to like, you don't have to like wonder if you have that part of yourself. You just have to be able to dig in and get to it. So anyway, I started posting these essays online pretty much once a week during 2020, and with the idea that hopefully they would be a book afterwards. And I was just so happy with the response to them. And then, of course, afterwards, I had to go back and do a ton more work and like streamline them and tighten them up and make them less repetitive. And I added a bunch more material, but mostly I was writing it during 2020. And that was actually really therapeutic for me because I did not have a great time in 2020. I had a really rough time. And it was not a great year. And so
no, I
was giving myself advice as much as anybody else about like, you can do this. It's okay. You can get through this.
So I probably would never have read this book if it wasn't by you. Because I don't consider myself a writer. And actually I have a lot of like deep-seated anxieties and like a lot of false talk about being a bad writer. So I just like don't even try. And so to me, I'm like, why would I ever read a book about writing when I'm never going to be a good writer? And I like loved this book. So I kind of want to say that in terms of like people who might be in the same position as me, where I do like, again, look, I say I'm not a writer and I'm not, but a lot of my work is like rooted in storytelling, right? And I am like co-writing stuff with other people and thinking about narrative stuff. And so for me, there's a couple of things that were really valuable in this. One is, it's what Ebony was saying. It's like, it's very inspirational, right? Like it made me be like, I could tell stories. There's a very low bar to entry, and you set it up in a way that's like, just try a thing. Like you don't need to make a career out of this. It doesn't have to be like, you just try it, and it might make you feel better in hard times, right? It might give you some hope. It might give you something to do even. And I love that like low entry point where it's like accessible to everybody, right? Whether you have ever written fan fiction or not, it's also so much your voice and you like who you are, like your persona of who you are, I guess, at least in terms of like really just inspiring and encouraging people and like the anecdotes and the phrasing and all of that. And one of the pieces is like your celebration of making mistakes, right? Your celebration of like, yeah, you're not going to be perfect. Nothing's going to be perfect. And you talk so much about all of your stories that never made it anywhere. Like there's so much of that in this. And I'm like, damn, how much have you written in your life? Right. And so, can you talk a little bit about like what that means for you and your process and why that's so important to this journey of becoming a writer, or just not actually, I'm going to rephrase this, the journey of just writing in general.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I feel like self-help books get like a bum rap. And I actually have a rant about this, about how like people diss self-help books. And I think part of it is because maybe self-help books are perceived as being mostly for women or mostly for people who aren't, cis white dudes. Or I don't know, there's just like,
or that there's something wrong. Like you would only read a self-help book because there's something wrong with you.
Yeah, as opposed to like, it's like, oh, you're admitting you have a problem, and that's clearly you're just weak or whatever. Yeah. Go out and drop and give me 20. I don't know. But I feel like I do think of this as being partly a self-help book and partly just like, providing some comfort and some, idea, some encouragement and some nurturing for like, you can be a creative person in whatever form that takes for you, and you can feel good about yourself while you're doing it, and you don't have to like hate yourself if you started to write a story and it didn't work out, or if you weren't able to get any writing done today or whatever. Like, this shouldn't always be like a thing that is like, a lot of pressure, like I said. But I think that I wanted this to be a little bit of a self-help book and a little bit of a like, look, we're all struggling. We're all struggling together. People are struggling whether they're writers or not. And like coming up with narratives that empower us, that make us feel like we can, survive and that we can get through everything is, it is a form of self-help. It's a form of self-care. And so that was the thing that I was really passionate about in this book. I've definitely struggled a lot in my writing. And I feel like there's a temptation when you reach a certain level of like success or prominence as a writer to just be like, yes, I just sprung fully formed. I'm an overnight success. Or, oh yeah, I totally, like, I always know what I'm doing. I just completely know what I'm doing all the time. And like, I'm just, I feel like because it's very vulnerable when you're putting stuff out into the world all the time and people are looking to you as like, I don't always feel like a successful author, but I think whatever, when people look at you as someone who's publishing books and stuff, there's a temptation to not be vulnerable and to just be like, well, of course, I'm totally rocking this. And so I think it's actually important to be like, nope, I struggled for years. I feel like I still struggle a lot. And,
Sorry, can I add, when you say struggle, can you elaborate a little bit about that? Is it like struggling to tell stories, struggling to like motivate yourself to do it? Like what? Do you mind breaking that apart a little bit?
I feel like the struggle is different on different days. Like, I feel like there are days when the struggle is, I feel like garbage and I can't write. And like, I'm just like having a really hard time getting words put on the page or feeling like I know what I'm doing with this story. There are also days where I just am like, wow, everything I'm writing is total garbage. Like, and I know that other writers have this. Like, I've interviewed other writers who are like, yeah, I have days where I just feel like everything I'm putting down is just total, just gibberish, or like the story is not happening. And especially the last few years, I've actually been very grateful to the people who are like some of my heroes who have been like, yep, the past year I've been trying, it hasn't been happening, or it's been happening, but it's been really bad. Like, I've been writing just stuff that I don't think is my best work. And, I think that there's all that. There's the thing where you think you know what a story is, and then you get halfway through and you're like, wow, I have no idea where this is going. All my ideas for where this story is going next they're not good ideas. If, I feel like this story is kind of just circling the drain. It's going around and around, and I don't know what this is about anymore. I don't really like these characters. I don't really feel like these characters are who I hoped they were going to be. Like, these characters are disappointing me. It's their fault. It's not my fault. It's the character's fault. I think that just, we all have bad writing days, bad writing weeks, bad writing months. It's just like a thing. And, sometimes you just got to be a little bit patient. I actually did a little TikTok about the other day about like, sometimes you just can't write and you just have to go out and take a walk instead. But I feel like for me, it's often a case that it's almost like I'll have like a spiritual crisis with a piece of fiction that I'm working on, especially something that like I'm under contract and like the publisher is like, yes, you are going to give us this book and we are going to publish it and we're going to spend all this energy promoting it and trying to convince people that they should spend money on it. Like, I'll have times where I'm just like, do I actually believe in this book? Do I believe in what I'm saying here? Do I feel like what is this book actually doing? Am I kind of just writing stuff that's not like, and there was a book that I wrote like several years ago that I ended up putting aside, and I tried to come back to it recently and rewrite it. And I was like, nope, still putting it aside for a while, because it was a book that I felt like I had reproduced some tropes that were kind of a little bit not great. There was like a femme fatale who turned into a damsel in distress. Like, the main female character was kind of both femme fatale and damsel in distress. She didn't have as much control over, not even control, but she didn't have as much input into her own situation as I would have liked her to have. The main character was a little bit of a cliche. It was just like, it's very easy to fall into just writing stuff that's regurgitating stuff you've seen before, or that you're just like, okay, I tried to follow this idea down to see how deep it went, and it didn't go as deep as it thought it would. I got 2 feet down and I hit rock, So I feel like you have to just be willing to just be like, okay, you know what, that didn't work. I'm going to have to circle back. I'm going to have to figure out if there's something here I can salvage. I may have to start over from scratch. I may have to just really rethink what this is about. That's often the thing for me, is like, I can handle like a bad writing day or a bad writing week where the stuff I'm putting down is just not great. But the thing that's really hard for me is when I just feel like, I don't believe in this story. And I just take a step back and figure out why I don't believe in this story. And I feel like that's the thing that if you try to power through it, you're going to be very sad later.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up this particular project, because you mentioned in the book having to decide between 2 projects, one of which was this like this project that, while very close to your heart in terms of your interests, perhaps was, a little too roadmappy, and just deciding like, maybe this wasn't the story I should be telling. And I thought, I have been writing long enough to know that once I reach a certain point, it is very hard for me to let go, because it's the sunk cost fallacy, right? You're like, no, I spent all this time writing this thing. This motherfucker's going to see the light of day in somebody's inbox, but just, the, wrestling with the idea of, is this the story I wanted to tell? Is this a story that only I can tell? Like that's huge. And so embracing like, maybe this wasn't the project for me, or maybe it wasn't the project for right now, but just giving yourself permission to do that as an artist, as a creative, was really validating,
Well, thanks. And, I've actually experienced the thing of publishing some fiction and some nonfiction, let's be real, in the past, which now I wish I hadn't. And now I'm like, oh, I hope nobody ever finds that thing I published, And luckily, most of those things were in smaller venues. Some of them were in bigger venues, but most of the really, really terrible stuff from early in my career that I'm now like, because I did used to have this attitude of like, if I write it and I finish it, it's going to get published. And I'll keep sending it out until it gets published. And in some cases, it still didn't get published because I just sent it out like 100 times and nobody wanted it. But there were cases where I was like, nope, okay, this is getting published no matter what. And it did get published. And now I'm like, oh gosh, that thing. And there are things that I'm very glad that they didn't get published at all, because there's some of the worst stuff. But, obviously that's part of the thing. I feel like if you're improving as a writer and progressing, you should be a little embarrassed by some of your early stuff. Like, I think that's that's natural and healthy. But also I think it's good to just like, part of getting better at a writer, like one of the things I think I say this in the book, I don't think we ever really get necessarily better as writers. We get better at spotting our own bullshit, And like, I'm now a little bit better at kind of listening to my gut when my gut is telling me, yeah, you're going down a path that you're not going to be happy when you get to the end of it. Like, my gut will tell me that. And I used to just be like, shut up, gut. I've committed to this path. And now I'm like, oh, maybe my gut has something, actually knows something that I should listen to. But okay, I'll give an example. Like, a couple of years ago, I had a story I wrote for a Lightspeed magazine where I had this character who was kind of a stereotypical, kind of a hippie stereotype. And I was just kind of making fun of hippies, kind of. And it was cute, but the character, it was a lot of cheap shots, honestly. And I feel like, okay, I live down the street from the Haight-Ashbury. I know a lot of hippies. Like, hippies are my neighbors. Hippies are like the people who live around me. And I could do a really nuanced, like, kind of smart takedown of hippie culture, which I think does have some issues. But this wasn't that. This was just literally the cheapest of cheap shots about hippies. And I was like, you know what? There are people who, if this gets published, who will be mad at me, and they'll be right. Because they'll be like, fair enough. There are critiques you can make of like, that kind of alternative hippy dippy culture stuff. And like, but you're just kind of making surface like cheap shot jokes. And so I actually wrote to the editor and was like, hey, I know that the story's already finalized, but I'm freaking out about this. Can I go back and just change this to a different thing? And it was actually not that hard. It took me a day or two to make the character different and funnier, I thought. Yeah. And, humor is often a place where I end up with that, because I'll sometimes go for the cheap joke and then realize, oh, no, don't go for the cheap joke.
But doesn't that, I would argue that makes you a better writer. I mean, you sort of just set up this dichotomy of like, you're not a better writer, you just call your own bullshit out. But by calling your own bullshit, you're like, I need to be more nuanced. I need to be more thoughtful. And that inherently is better writing.
Yeah, I guess what I mean is not that we don't get better at writing, but that like how we get better at writing is spotting our own bullshit. It's not like I'm like, because, it's not that I'm like, I just like the first time around, I always know what I'm doing. And I'm like, oh, I'm a crafts person. I'm going to hold this thing exactly level and sand it and plane it. And like, now I know how to make this thing because I've made it before and I've like, can measure it and do it perfectly. Like, as everybody knows, every story you start, you're kind of starting over from scratch. Every story you start, you're kind of starting over from scratch. And you have to figure it out as you go. And the part that you get better at is realizing when you're falling into some of your bad habits or you're just on your bullshit again, kind of.
One thing I've been saying a lot, which I don't know if I've talked about it here, but I'm talking about this a lot because I'm trying to internalize it for myself, is that in order to get good at something, you have to do it a lot. Like you just do. Like that's the reality. And so
you got to be shitty at first.
Yeah, and I'm reminded because that's exactly what you all were talking about. And like personally, I'm doing things in my life that are new that I've never done before, and I'm just like, why aren't I perfect? Like, because it's really weird to be shifting mid-career in some ways to something that is, it might be adjacent but unfamiliar. And so like the idea of the people like Charlie Jane, I think you're an amazing writer. Like I've always loved your writing and your books. And like, I think we actually met because I read All the Birds in the Sky and was like, do you want to meet me so I can tell you in person that I love your book, please? I do this to people. It's really awkward. It's
not creepy at all.
It's super creepy. I just did this recently with somebody else that's an author that I'm now like, you're my favorite. Can we meet?
Wait, someone else is your favorite?
No, second favorite.
Who is this person? I'm coming to their house.
You're my first favorite.
Mm-hmm.
I lost my mind after reading Sarah Gailey's The Echo Wife.
Okay, fair enough. You're allowed to have Sarah Gailey's your favorite.
But that's
I will
okay.
Allow it.
You're still.
I will allow it.
It's head to head. You all can battle it out. But anyways, I think that it's just like, but you did so much writing before you published your first book, or your first novel, which I think is like such an important, huge part of understanding your process and how you get there, and to get to the point where you wrote this amazing. Is it even your first novel? It wasn't even your first novel, was it?
I think All the Birds in the Sky is like my fifth novel.
Yeah, see?
Or my sixth. I actually did publish my first novel back in 2005, but it was a really pretty small publisher, kind of slid under the radar. And I wrote some other novels which never saw the light of the day, and that's just what happens.
I think that I am getting really self-conscious because, like, as a public figure that is known, or like as a person who is known, like it's terrifying to put stuff out there that's not good.
Mm.
You know what I mean? So when like, if anyone else is in this position too, it's kind of like this moment of like, I don't get to start as an unknown figure in a new field doing something badly until I get good at it. Right. So like so I don't know. Part of why I think the book is so interesting is because it does walk you through being like, you got to start somewhere to some degree. Right. And it's not always going to be great, and that's okay. And like you both are saying, you don't have to publish or show everything to everyone.
Oh, I am looking forward to, several boxes of my writing being found by my nieces and nephews, and then flipping through and being like, this is garbage, Like I'm actively looking forward to them finding my papers once I shuffle off this mortal coil. But yeah, I mean, I think like embracing the dump draft, is huge. Just the idea that it's not even a rough draft. It doesn't even approach the level of a rough draft. It's even way shittier than that.
Can I share something really stupid? So I'm a media critic. I've been a critic for 10 years. I critique creative works, right? Mm-hmm. So me and my writing partner are almost done with the first draft of our script, and we need to like give it to people to read and get feedback. And I was like, I don't want feedback. It's like, I'm going to be so defensive and like precious about my shit. And I'm just like, it's the irony of these two realities of like, I can dish it, but can't take it. I mean, it doesn't mean that I can't take it. I just haven't even done that yet. And I feel sometimes like, I wish I went to art school like so many of my peers, because in art school, you learn to trash your drafts over and over again and restart again and again and get feedback again and again. And I feel like a little baby starting from scratch, being like, but you don't like my thing. Why don't you like this thing? And nobody's even seen it yet. So there's no one to not like it or whatever. But anyways, I just think it's really, this conversation's bringing up a lot of things for me, clearly.
I'm sure it's awesome. I'm excited for your screenplay.
Yeah, I'm going to send it to you.
Feedback is hard for everyone, right? And I mean, sometimes it's just a matter of recognizing how you best take feedback. So if you're someone who can like roll with the punches in the moment, cool. I'm not that kind of person. Like I'm going to need to go be in my feelings for a little bit and digest it and let it marinate for a while. So I may be like stone-faced, and it may, seem as if I'm not taking stuff in, but it's just because I cannot receive stuff in the moment. So sometimes you just got to be like, okay, this is hard for me.
Thanks, bye.
I'm going to go cry in the rain.
Let's be honest, not all feedback is equal.
That part too.
There's definitely, I think that might be, I'd love to hear both of your experiences with this, but I feel like, people, there's going to be all kinds of feedback, and you got to learn how to filter it in terms of like what is actually useful really and what isn't for you.
Yeah.
You got to some feedback is more helpful than others. And I feel like, I've definitely grown a thick skin in general. Like you kind of have to. And as someone who's did a lot of criticism back in the days, and sometimes was a little bit harsh about stuff, I would say. Just a wee bit, especially about big productions usually, where I was felt like I was punching up. But, I now slightly regret some of the harsh things that I wrote back in the day, but I definitely feel like I ought to be able to take it. Like in terms of criticism, when it comes to feedback, I think that helpful feedback is usually feedback that comes from a place of, I liked a lot of stuff about this. Here's what I thought this was about, or what I thought the point of this was, or what I thought you were working towards, and here's how I think you could get there better. I feel like, this part is so great, but if it happened a little earlier, it would have more impact. Or, I just had some questions about this character. I feel like this character was really interesting, but I needed to know more about this thing. And I don't know. I don't think feedback should be like criticism necessarily, because it's a very different kind of thing. Like, I think that criticism is not aimed at the artist, not aimed at the creator. It's about, is this thing worth, your time? Should you consume it or not? Is it worth spending time or money on? Versus you created this thing, I support you, and here's ways that I feel like you can get to the heart of what this thing could be a little bit better.
I love that distinction of feedback and criticism are two different things. Although I do want to complicate, not that I don't want to spend too much time here, but that I think criticism is much more nuanced than just should you spend your time with a thing, right?
No, it's true.
Yeah.
It's really
so I just want it to be I think that criticism is critical to healthy art, right? To the existence of growth in art and society. And that it's not just you could criticize art in a free museum and there's still value to whether you should spend your time. Well, I guess that is time, right? Time or money is our currencies. But that it not only, I think that good criticism can help you think about the world differently, right? It can help you think about how you engage with different media, and it's far beyond just the one piece off. It doesn't always. I mean, let's be honest, a lot of criticism is garbage, but I think really good criticism really gets you thinking about stuff and reflecting on yourself and those sorts of things.
No, of course. And it's true that when I was doing a lot of movie reviews, I would sometimes really try to not just say, oh, this movie is good or bad, but what is this movie doing? How is it working? What's it really about below the surface? What are the things that you should look out for? Especially a lot of movies that I was reviewing, I knew that everybody was going to go see them anyway. And it's just you're already going to go see this because it's the new Star Wars movie or whatever. I can't, if I told you not to see this, you would ignore me. So, and I wouldn't, because I love Star Wars. But, here are some things to maybe think about as you're watching the movie, things that I noticed that might be interesting, that I'm not going to give spoilers, but think about how it uses these motifs or whatever,
Yeah.
I feel like that is a part of criticism, and it's not just about thumbs up, thumbs down necessarily. You're totally correct.
Yeah.
I think I get defensive about that too, just because in video game criticism, so much of it historically was literally tech reviews. Do you buy the game because it's running in a fast enough, blah, 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 whatever, you know what I mean? And and that's obviously not the history of criticism, but that is the history of games criticism. But Ebony, I want to ask you a question.
I'm not the guest. Whatever my answer is gonna be a lie.
Great. I can't wait. Well, we know that Charlie Jane spent the pandemic writing 500 books.
Right?
I was wondering the title of the book is Never Say You Can't Survive, How to Get Through Hard Times by Making Up Stories, right? In the pandemic times, which we are still in, let's be fucking honest about that. But during like the height of the lockdown, I think it was very hard for people to be creative and productive and all of the things that, you know, some people were like, I finished the manuscripts and pitched 25 TV shows and did all of these things. And some people were like, I woke up every day.
Mm-hmm. And
you know, like,
victories.
And I fed myself sometimes, some of those times, right? Mm-hmm. So I'm just wondering, like, Ebony, was there any creative stuff that you did that helped you in the pandemic, or was it harder for you to get stuff? Like, what did that look like for you?
Yeah, the only thing that helped me during the pandemic was joining a new writers group and being accountable to other people, but in a very gentle way, not, you know, drill sergeant style, like a very gentle accountability. But also just once I got over or got past, I should say, my inability to consume any media, because there was a period where during the pandemic where my brain couldn't rest, you know, and so it was hard to watch things. It was hard to read things. Once I sort of, you know, moved past that, and it still flares up, just really immersing myself in as much new stuff as possible, but also taking the time to go back to those like just comfort reads and comfort watches and allowing myself to find new things in there and allowing that to kind of inspire me. I kind of, you know, folded myself up in a cloak of like Doctor Who protection, you know, and just rewatched episodes over and over again. You know what's up, Charlie Jane. That's honestly,
there's a lot of hand gestures of excitement happening. Yes, Doctor Who.
This is great for radio, great for podcasts. But yeah, that's all I could do. But I also just was like, you know what? This is probably not going to be a fertile and productive period for you. You know, it just isn't. You're still telling yourself stories, but you're not getting a lot of stuff down. But you know, you're buying ingredients. You're chopping up the veggies. This is a bad metaphor. It's why my writing is not where it should be right now. But yeah, you know, I'll cook the stew when it's time to cook the stew. Charlie Jane, what about you?
Now I'm hungry. Now I want stew. I'm like, where are these veggies that I keep hearing about? Man.
Yes.
Man, I mean, it was really hard. Like I say in the book, like 2020 was like the worst year of my life. Thus far, 2021 is better than 2020, but it's not like great. It's not. It's still definitely one of the worst years. And like, you know, there was definitely, like I'd say spring and summer of 2020, I had a really hard time getting anything done. And the fact that I was writing these essays was actually probably a really good thing, because it was like that was a deadline that I had every week where I was like, okay, I got to write some encouraging words every week that hopefully someone will take to heart and that'll help other people to be creative. And I was just like, kind of just bashing my head against the wall a little bit, but also just letting myself not create it for a while. Like it was the most uncreative period of my life, I think, was like the spring and summer of 2020. And I think midsummer 2020, I finally started to kind of get back to where I was like, okay, I'm now reconnecting and finding a new writing routine that doesn't involve going and sitting in cafes, and also just kind of clearing my head, putting severe limits on the doom scrolling and like the, you know, everything. And I just kind of like shut out the world as much as I could and just tried to get work done. And it was really hard. It was a really tough time. And, you know, man, yeah, it was hard. Like, you know, I had promised to write a short story for some folks, I think in like April 2020, that I was like, you know, these people they were doing like a special science fiction issue of this magazine, and they were like, can you just give us a short story? And I was like, yeah, okay, I'll get you. I have this idea for a story. I can get it done. And, you know, basically, this is a little dark. I apologize, but my dad died, and the story was due like 2 days later. And I don't even remember writing it. I just don't even remember. I got it done somehow, but I don't remember anything about that. I just was like, somehow that story got done. I don't know, because I'd promised it to them and they were going to press, and I was just like, it's going to happen.
Do you like the story?
I think it actually is pretty good. I haven't gone back and reread it lately, but people have told me that they like it. So, I mean, it was an idea that was a a very uplifting idea, so that was good. But that was hard.
Yeah.
Like I wrote it in 2 days.
You talk about writing as like recuperation and as healing in this book, but also about how telling stories, creating stories allows you to be like the god in your own universe, which I can imagine, well, I know, can feel so powerful in those moments of devastation, of confusion, the sense that there's one arena in which I have some control, and it is this. It is the way that I put together and shape this story. And I hadn't really thought about it in that way, but I was like, yes, and it fed my profound narcissism to be like, yes, I am a god to these people, like these characters, they are my creations. It was kind of cool to think about it in that way.
Yeah, and I think that, it's that whole sort of God's eye perspective that like you control every aspect of this story. I really do think that that's important in a couple ways. One is that, you get to kind of like, you can create a world that makes sense to you, whether it's a happy world or a dystopian world, it makes sense to you. And it, has logic that you can understand when honestly the real world often doesn't. Like the real world, I'm like, who the heck decided that any of this made sense? Like, how did we end up with any of this? This is just ridiculous. Like, we all have to pretend that stuff makes sense in the real world when we know it doesn't. We know that none of this stuff makes sense. And, I think that that's really powerful. Getting to just, like, have that level of, like, getting to make choices and just, like, play them out and be like, what if it's a world where everybody lives on boats and it's just like a boat society and everybody's just like going around on boats all the time.
So
it's
Waterworld?
really cool. Or
I'm kidding.
Or something
okay,
better.
Not Waterworld, but they're whatever. They're on flying boats. Okay, it's flying boats. They're flying over the land. I don't know. Point is, you get to just have like a thing that you want to try out that you could never make happen in real life, but you can do it in a story, and you get to like kind of decide how things turn out, and you can see justice done when it might not be done in real life. The other thing, though, that I talk a lot about in the book is that you get to control the framing of the story, and you get to like there's been a bunch of novels lately that do that kind of Cloud Atlas thing where it's like part of the story takes place 500 years ago, part of the story takes place now, part of the story takes place 100 years from now, and you can show the sweep of history, and you can show like how stuff that happened 500 years ago is still shaping the world we live in right now, contrary to all those people who want to whine about, I'm just going to say it, the 1619 Project or whatever, who are like, why is that still relevant? Why do we have to care about this? Or why do we have to hear about this? It's like, it's still relevant. It's still shaping our world. This was, in a lot of ways, the starting point of where we ended up now. And so when you're writing a story, you can just jump back and forth between then and now and kind of draw parallels and show how, okay, there was some stuff happening back then and similar stuff is happening now. And maybe if we understand that, we'll be able to, 100 years from now, something else will be happening. We'll be able to fix some stuff.
Yeah.
And I think that ability to kind of draw the lines and show, juxtapose stuff and show the parallels is super powerful, especially when you're dealing with a lot of injustice in real life.
Yeah. So you inspire me. And so I don't review, you'll note, like, people might notice that I've never reviewed a book, and I don't do criticism around books because they're my happy place. Like, they're just, it's what it cannot be work for me. It has to be like the place that I go to just like, for me, a lot of what you talk about with writing and like this sort of escapist feeling that I think you skirt around a little bit in terms of writing, and that for me is reading, right? Like is these fantasy worlds that are created that have all of those things where justice can be done, where you have all these fascinating, amazing characters. And to me, like, I don't ever want that to feel like work, And so anyways, that I've got a tangent on that, but like, I often feel inspired after reading your work, and like, especially with this book and learning kind of the process of it and and all of that. Who are the people or the things that are inspiring you? Like what is your equivalent to me for you?
Who is the vision to your Scarlet Witch?
Exactly.
I mean, people that I like.
Or things. I'm just curious, like what keeps you motivated and energized?
I mean, you already mentioned Sarah Gailey. Sarah Gailey is amazing. Huge fan of their
I'm reading
work.
American Hippo right now, and just like I'm in love with this person. Their writing is blowing my mind.
They're so like, I love the world building and just like that whole like, it sounds goofy like a Western with hippos, but it's actually
but it's so good.
Kind of just like exciting, fun. I mean, I think Becky Chambers for sure, N.K. Jemisin. N.K. Jemisin is just a constant source of inspiration to me. And like, when I went from like, you go from like the Broken Earth trilogy to The City We Became, and it's just like, it's like, wow, this person can do anything. She can do anything. Yeah. Like, the City We Became is just like this kind of like, it's very funny. It's much funnier than I had kind of expected from her other work. And it's just it's so comforting and reassuring, but also so incisive. She just gets into like everything that, I don't know. I'm such a huge fan of her work. Who else? I mean, I did watch a ton of like Legends of Tomorrow and like, She-Ra and the Princess of Power. I'm kind of obsessed with Noelle Stevenson a little bit.
Yes.
And, Rebecca Sugar, Steven Universe. Man, what else?
I mean, that's a lot. I feel like, feel free to continue. That was like,
but there's so much else. Like,
I would
there's so many.
Also argue, I mean, I can't help but gush about it. It's so, I know I'm being creepy, but like the way that you talk about N.K. Jemisin being able to create these totally different types of worlds and stories, like I've described you exactly that way. Like, I think that you're like going from All the Birds in the Sky to The City in the Middle of the Night to Victory's Greater Than Death, like are wildly different types of stories and environments and stuff. And I think that, if that is an inspiration from you, you are clearly reflecting that back in your work too, So.
Well, thank you. Yeah. I mean, I try not to like, I try to kind of, keep changing it up, and I was thinking the other day about like one of my all-time inspirations, Prince. And I was like, sometimes I feel like I would be better, like my career would be better or something else would be better if I had just followed up All the Birds of the Sky with like even more of the Birds of the Sky, like 100 times more Birds of the Sky. But like I think about how Prince followed up Purple Rain with Around the World in a Day and like how he was like, no, and he said in interviews at the time, yeah, I should have probably just done another Purple Rain. I could have done another album like Purple Rain, but I didn't want to. I wanted to like keep surprising people and keep people on their toes and like, oh, here's some violins and some like psychedelic, I don't know. I mean, I'm really inspired by that. Like people, I love artists, writers, creators who just like, you don't know what you're going to get from them next, know?
I read a book about Prince a few years back and I loved the way they framed it in terms of like, yes, Prince is prolific. Like the amount of like unparalleled. And so like there's few people in the world that created as much as Prince created. And it's not all good, right? Like it's not. Like I fucking love Prince. Like you've never been to my house, but if you come to my house, you will not question that. But like that, that I think that people who create that much are going to have ebbs and flows. And it's part of what we were talking about a little bit of like, not everything's a winner. And that is part of the creative process, I think.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Although I gotta say, I've been grumpy lately because Prince, they put out this posthumous album, Welcome to America, which I love. I think it's an amazing album. But I read all these reviews online which said, this is so much better than all the music he was actually releasing during that time. And I'm like, no, he released some pretty solid music during that time. It's just that you all were not paying attention. And if he put out Welcome to America in 2010, 2011, you probably would have ignored it. But now that it's this great posthumous release that's like 10 years later.
Well, and it's also like the vault, right? Like Prince's vault was so mysterious to us because we never, so it's like we get access to all that stuff and there's nothing else, right? So I think people have, are listening to Prince differently or listening to
I think they are
stuff
for sure.
Yeah.
I think they are.
But yeah.
Definitely.
Oh, Prince. I love him. I need to send you what I was talking about. So this happened to me the other day where there was someone who was visiting me and had been to my house several times and was like, oh, you're a fan of Prince? I was like, you've literally been in my house. What are you talking about? When you walk in my house, the very first thing you see is this beautiful, giant, custom like art woodcut of Prince. It's enormous. It's a friend of mine made it. Yeah, and I was like,
God.
And this person, I was like, I don't understand how you're asking me this question. It's literally the first thing you see when you walk in my house.
No, listen, people don't pay attention. I remember some dude talking about Doctor Who, questioning my Doctor Who opinions while I was wearing like a Doctor Who shirt. And I'm like, don't make me tap the shirt. Like, what is it? You know, just people don't pay attention.
That annoys me when people start stuff like
gatekeeping.
Gatekeeping, like the whole like, are you qualified to love this thing? Mm-hmm. Shut up.
Yeah.
Shut up.
Yeah. Great way to end the segment. All right. So fuck gatekeeping. All right, y'all. Never Say You Can't Survive, How to Get Through Hard Times by Making Up Stories is Charlie Jane Anders' newest book, one of 3 that is being released in this year of our Lord 2021. It's really, really good. And it's way better than the conversation we just had that Ebony and I destroyed.
Yeah, but I mean, if you listen to our podcast,
you're used to this shit. It is either out now, or will be out very soon. So either pre-order it or pick it up. Honestly, even if you're not a writer, I think it will help you think about media differently. And I think that this is going to be like a classic book on writing, and I hope for that in the future. So please check it out. We'll send link info in the info box, in the more info. I don't know how podcasts work. All right, we'll be right back.
What's up, FFR listeners? We've got so much great conversation coming your way this month on Feminist Frequency Radio. Why not sign up to get early access and bonus episodes? Oh, and help us keep making the show? Head on over to patreon.com/femfreak today and sign up.
Now it's time to talk about what's been thrilling us, moving us, upsetting us, or infuriating us this past week. Ebony, you have a freak out for the first time in history.
I do. I know. Shut up. You know what? Don't set me up that way. And this is good because I'll be very quick and then we can toss it back to Charlie Jane. My freak out is Reservation Dogs, which you can watch on Hulu. It is a news show about this group of just like, oh my God, these hilarious, messed up, good-hearted but making bad decisions Indigenous kids in Oklahoma. Show created and written by Sterling Harjo, who is an amazing, amazing filmmaker, and co-executive produced by Taika Waititi. Like, y'all, this show, I think there's a couple of, I've seen 2 episodes. I think there's a couple more available on Hulu. I cannot wait to watch them. But the minute you watch it, you're like, yes, more of this, please. Why are we not, seeing so much more, from Indigenous creatives? Because there is a huge wealth of talent out there, whether it's in drama or comedy or science fiction or whatever. And we're getting bits and pieces, dribs and drabs. But man, this show is good. It's good.
Really good. I've only watched 1 episode and I'm just like, yes.
Yeah. I mean, every character is hilarious to me, but oh my God, I can't remember. See, I've only seen a couple episodes and I'm still remembering folks' names, but the one like just badass girl who like is just a problem, the one who makes meat pies.
The one that's like, the one that's like, I gotta get out of town right now.
Yes, listen, she's gonna become your new favorite thing. Yeah. So Sterling Harjo, Taika Waititi, all the amazing Indigenous creatives, like from writers' rooms, episode directors, like it's just all up and down in this piece, which is the way that it should be. Representation in front of the camera ultimately means nothing if it's not a 360, if it's not people behind the camera too, actually writing those stories, shooting those stories, producing those stories. So yeah, big recommend for Reservation Dogs on, you can check it out on Hulu.
Yeah. I double that. I plus one that.
Definitely tracking that down. That sounds amazing.
Also,
it's so good.
Well, I also want to say, a thing. What do I want to say? I want to say too, when we're talking about like representation in front of and behind the camera, like I think it's fucking awesome that we get a little bit more media about audience or populations that we have historically been erased from media. But I also want to be like, I want all of these like Indigenous and people of color and trans creators to be working on all kinds of stuff, right? Like I want to make sure that as we're also advocating for an increase in those stories and the people who own the stories to tell them, I also just want to see like more people telling all kinds of different stories, right? Like, yeah, like I want the writers' rooms of all of the stories about all of the different weird, random ass things to include a much broader representation. Cause like how dope is it if they would bring in all of their world experiences and knowledge into science fiction and whatever, you know?
Right. And I do, like, I want to make it clear that the version of success that I'm looking for is not for like, you know, some sort of ghettoized, you know, version of, or like misunderstood, like own voices kind of thing, where it's like, this is what you write because this is who you are and this is your lane. But I also don't think like the version of success that I'm going for is like inserting Indigenous, trans, you know, poor, working class, you know, disabled creatives into white worlds that are like mainstream white, you know, creative spaces, and saying like, oh, now you've made it because now you're directing a Marvel movie, or now you've made it because, you know, you've got a show on the CW, but the cast is white, the stories are very culturally white, whatever, you know.
Well, and if you have a writer's room, totally. And if you have a writer's room that's not all white people, then hopefully that won't be the story. But then you get into all of the like the studio heads coming down and making all those decisions about who can and can't, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And we're going to talk about The White Lotus, which I don't want to do because I can't stand that fucking show.
Oh my God.
You're talking about a show about white people. And I'm just like,
listen.
Have not watched it yet.
Don't do it. Why? Okay. What? I'm totally spoiling the cast for the future when we do this. Watch the first episode and then don't watch any more of it. Like, that's it. You'll get the point.
I have not had a chance to dive in yet, but I'm gonna watch the whole thing because I follow my girl Jennifer Coolidge. I follow my girl Natasha Rothwell. So I'm gonna stick with it.
Great. Natasha Rothwell is fucking great. It literally is a show that's divided between like the most atrociously horrible white people and then like some people of color that are not terrible. Like that, you know, like, so like there's how their storyline, how their storylines intersect with these terrible white people.
It'll feel very familiar to me.
It should have been a movie. It's too long. Whatever. Okay, Charlie Jane, what do you got for us? Different episode. You freaking out about anything?
You know, I want to shout out a book that's given me so much joy lately that just like I keep thinking about it. I'm so happy about it. It's called Perfectly Parvin by my friend Olivia Abtahi. It's a young adult book. It's a romance. It's not actually science fiction or anything, although I know Olivia is working on some stuff that is sci-fi. It's a romance about basically, it's this girl named Parvin who is Iranian American, like my friend Olivia, and she has a summer romance with this dude who then dumps her on the first day of school. And he says that she's too much, she's too obnoxious. And so she decides that she's going to tone herself down so she can find another boyfriend before the big like dance or whatever. And she's trying to decide between these two boys, and they kind of represent two different visions of the person she could be. And it's just, it reminds me a little bit of like some other stuff like Never Have I Ever or To All the Boys I've Kissed Before. But I won't spoil it, but the resolution is so perfect. Like the resolution to the love triangle is just exactly what I wanted. And it's so ideal. And Parvin is just this really just like, even though she's struggling with like this idea that she's too loud and too obnoxious, which she slowly starts to realize that actually what that means is that she's too Iranian and that she's, you know, that she needs to tone herself down in a way that's like actually kind of unhealthy. And it's a book that it sneaks up on you and how political it gets. Like it, you know, it takes place, Olivia wrote it, you know, over the last few years, and it kind of takes place during the era that just ended and the Muslim ban and everything. And this stuff kind of sneaks up on you. You don't kind of realize how political it's going to get until you're halfway through. And then you're like, oh, okay, that's what this is really about. And it's very sneaky in a wonderful way. but it never stops having that kind of joyful, kind of like teen, kind of rom-com, I'm going to make myself over and find a boyfriend kind of energy. And it never gets too dark or depressing or sad. It's a really fun, cute book. Like, you should just go look at the cover. The cover just really sells you on it because it's just this really cute set of photos of Parvin. And the only negative thing I would say about Perfectly Parvin is that she's obsessed with hot Cheetos. And now I'm also obsessed with hot Cheetos. So I've been eating a lot of hot Cheetos, and it's probably not what I should be eating all the time. But what are you going to do?
There's a part for you in Reservation Dogs about eating too many hot chips. You're going to love it.
Okay, I'm really sold.
If that's the worst thing that comes out of reading a book, I think you're doing all right. Can you say the title and author again real quick?
It's called Perfectly Parvin, spelled Parvin, by Olivia Abtahi, and her last name is spelled Abtahi.
Awesome. That sounds delightful.
Yeah.
Y'all, we want your freakouts. You know the drill. You can submit it at feministfrequency.com/freakout, FREQOUT. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening to Feminist Frequency Radio. Charlie Jane Anders. I might turn this podcast into a Charlie Jane Anders fan club because I think you are the most talented. More than Sarah Gailey, because it's a competition.
I was about to say, I was like, wait a minute, what about Sarah Gailey?
I haven't read as many of their books as yours.
This is where the beef starts. This is where the beef starts, like online battle.
We're going to have to arm wrestle. Me and Sarah, we're going to arm wrestle for your love.
Great. I love this.
I'm into it.
Can we have our own triangle?
Televise it.
Can we have our own like
live
fan
stream it for charity?
Yeah. Well, Sarah Gailey doesn't know me yet and doesn't have the same relationship as us. So I have to be friends with them first, which I'm working on. So.
I want to be your trainer, Charlie Jane, like Burgess Meredith in the Rocky movies. Y'all, you can't see this because it's podcast, but I just saw Charlie Jane's cat in the background of the shot.
Cute.
And
Ebony's
it is
face
a cute
just went.
Cat.
Yeah.
Okay.
I feel like I should be battling for their affection, but I really love that this is turned around.
You ain't got no
battling
hands
for my affection.
You ain't got no hands.
I know. Charlie Jane, where can folks find you? What do you want them to do when they find you?
Ominous.
What do you want to plug? Now's your time.
I'm on Twitter at Charlie Jane. My website is charliejane.com. I'm on Instagram as Charlie Jane Anders. And, I got a ton of books out that it would mean a lot to me if people would buy them or pre-order them, including my short story collection that comes out this fall, Even Greater Mistakes.
Ooh.
Amazing. All right, everyone. Tune in next week when we'll be chatting about season 2 of Tuca and Birdie with Annalee Newitz, another author that we love here. That's in the whole Feminist Frequency family. You can catch all those episodes on Adult Swim. I know it's hard to find Tuca and Birdie this year, but you should watch it. And it's on Adult Swim. So figure that out. Our show is engineered by Rob Pera. Carrie Stimson provides technical support. Artwork by Jamie Varon. And our intro music is by Phil Circus. And for all of you patrons, stay tuned because Charlie Jane's going to be on the bonus with us. Bye.
Bye.